Pedro Acosta just described his 2027 future alongside Marc Marquez as a dream come true. Same garage, same bike, same data, no excuses left. And he called that a dream. The paddock heard something very different. So why does the most dangerous scenario in the sport sound like admiration? And what does it say about Acosta that he chose it anyway? That word changes everything. Not because of what Acosta said, because of where he said it leads. Not admiration, not respect toward a legend. A voluntary step into the one place where riders get fully exposed with no protection left. He chose the one environment where no excuse survives, no setup narrative holds, and no team structure separates the result from the verdict. No rider asks for direct comparison with Marquez unless they believe they can win it. Listen to what Acosta actually said. For me, it would definitely be a dream come true. I think quite a few people in this paddock, except maybe his brother, would pay to spend a year alongside Marc as a teammate. Why wouldn't I do it? That's not distance, that's intent. And that is a direct invitation to the most dangerous comparison in the sport. This is why one word from Acosta changed the entire shape of this rivalry before a single lap has been shared. Let's have a look at what that verdict actually looks like, because the moment teammate enters this conversation, the entire structure of the rivalry changes. We know for a fact that machinery is the last refuge of every MotoGP narrative. When results go wrong, there is always an explanation. The bike wasn't right, the setup wasn't dialed in, the package didn't suit the style. Those explanations soften outcomes. They create distance between the result and the verdict. The most uncomfortable comparisons in MotoGP history have always been between teammates, because the moment they share a garage, every explanation disappears. Not different bike, not wrong setup, not bad package. The same data, the same engineers, the same machinery on the same weekend. There is no more lethal environment in motorsport than the one where a young rider who wants to be considered the best is placed directly next to the rider the sport already calls the greatest, with nothing between them and the verdict, except the lap times. Every qualifying session becomes a direct measurement. Every race start becomes a direct comparison. Every data sheet becomes evidence. At the end of a season in that environment, what is left to say? The teammate scenario isn't just dangerous for one rider. It is dangerous for the narrative that both of them have spent their entire careers building. What happens to that narrative when the result makes it impossible to maintain? But the story doesn't end there, because the reaction to Acosta's words told a completely different story from the words themselves. The fans who heard "dream come true" didn't respond with warmth. They responded with conflict. Marquez called Acosta the leader of the younger generation and said he hopes to compete with him for many more races, adding that Acosta will be one of the riders who defines a MotoGP era. Generous words on the surface, but read them again. Every phrase positions Acosta as the future and Marquez as the present, the leader of the generation below him, the one who will define what comes next. That is not a compliment from an equal. That is a line drawn by someone who has already decided which side of it he stands on. The comment that cut through everything in the fan reaction was simpler and more brutal. Dream for Pedro, nightmare for Marc. One line. Acosta's framing inverted completely. And even when the story is about Acosta, the reaction orbits Marquez. The comments, the takes, the emotional charge, all of it flows back toward one name. The story doesn't belong to the future. It still belongs to the past. And more importantly, Marquez remains so polarizing that a neutral comment from a different rider becomes a battlefield the moment his name enters the sentence. Acosta didn't start a fight. He just said a name, and the fight was already waiting. The audience is not waiting for the pairing to be confirmed before choosing sides. They already have, and they chose the moment Acosta spoke. And the emotional charge around this story, before the 2027 season has even begun, is the clearest signal of how much is actually at stake. How do you manage a rivalry the audience has already decided is a war? And how do you keep control of a story the sport has already decided? We've seen generational rivalries before. This one is different. Let's not forget that what this pairing would represent is not just two fast riders on the same team. It is the cleanest generational collision MotoGP can produce. Marquez has already responded, not with warmth, but with a line that tells you exactly how he sees it. He doesn't want to destroy Acosta. He wants to draw boundaries, make clear who the reference point is. Marquez on one side, the last dominant era, the standard by which everything in this sport is currently measured. Acosta on the other, the talent that the next era is already being built around. And instead of facing each other across different machinery, they would be forced into the same environment, same reference, same benchmark, no narrative distance. And oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention, the risk in this situation is not symmetrical. If Marquez beats Acosta, and beats him clearly, it confirms what most of the paddock already believes. Another data point to a story that doesn't need more. Nothing changes. But if Acosta beats Marquez, inside the same garage, on the same machinery, in the same environment, it doesn't just win races. It rewrites the sport's understanding of where the power currently sits. It signals that the transition is not coming. More than anything, it signals that it is already done. There is no more consequential result MotoGP can produce right now than that one. Marquez winning changes nothing. Acosta winning changes everything. And the most uncomfortable version isn't even the result. It is the moment the paddock realizes it was inevitable, that the shift had already happened before anyone was ready to name it. How often does MotoGP get a moment where one result resets an era, and the other simply maintains it? That asymmetry exists the moment Acosta said the word, not when they share a garage. Now, there are two possible scenarios from here, and the distance between them is defined entirely by whether this pairing actually happens. The first is that Ducati's structure complicates it. Competing interests, different programs within the same team, expectations that diverge before the season starts. A confirmed pairing on paper doesn't automatically produce the clean, unprotected comparison the audience is building toward. I don't think this pairing settles the question cleanly, even if it happens. But the question does not go away, because Acosta already said the word. And once that word is out there, the conversation doesn't stop. The audience has chosen sides. The comparison doesn't need the same garage. It only needed one sentence. On the other hand, they end up in the same garage. At the end of the day, the most dangerous moment in a generational transition isn't when the new talent first appears. It is when the sport is forced to measure the old era and the new one against the same reference point at the same time, and the result makes it impossible to pretend the transition hasn't already started. Every race weekend becomes a verdict. Every points gap becomes a statement. And every lap they share becomes evidence that cannot be ignored, explained away, or reframed. But there is nowhere to hide from either. Acosta called it a dream. The audience called it a war. And MotoGP will decide which one it really is. Let us know in the comments below. And once you do that, make sure to click on the video appearing on your screen right now.